somebody?
I can hear you
perfectly.
Now
we
it
are
works.
live.
Okay.
Fine. No.
Quem é LIDE transforma. O LIDE apoiou a aprovação da Política Nacional de Resíduos Sólidos, lei que reformula o saneamento básico brasileiro. Quem é LIDE inova. O LIDE ajudou a criar o Pacto pelo Esporte, um acordo entre empresas patrocinadoras do esporte brasileiro. Quem é LIDE educa. O LIDE colabora com o Instituto Ayrton Senna em projetos de educação que chegam a 1,5 milhão de crianças a cada ano. Quem é LIDE conecta. O LIDE promove a conexão para alavancar relacionamentos, parcerias e novos negócios. Quem é LIDE conquista, movimenta, renova, realiza, faz o futuro. Quem é LIDE participa.
So, good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Fabienne Oskadi-Bergs, and I am the CEO from LIDE Germany. LIDE is an exclusive group of over 2,000 decision makers worldwide, especially in Brazil and Latin America. LIDE is active in 20 countries on 5 continents. In Brazil alone, our members generate over 50% of the country's private GDP. And thanks to our network, LIDE has been enabling German and international entrepreneurs to make highly qualified industry-specific contacts directly in other countries with this German branch in Munich. So the president from LIDE Germany is entrepreneur and spokesman from Hirmer Group, Dr. Christian Hirmer. So today we are going to be talking about practical experience exchange in the age of coronavirus. And these are our guests.
Okay, there we are.
So, during the talk, you can send us your questions on the chat in your display. And now I'm happy to present our moderation to you. André Müller-Carioba, chairman of our advisory board, has a long-standing leadership experience, including as former president of BMW in Brazil and chairman of the advisory board of AGTO South America, and is one of the founding members of LIDE Brazil. André, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fabiana. So good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us, to everybody. And I would like to shortly present the participants. So let me please start with Dr. José Ricardo dos Santos Jr. He is Brazilian. He is the president of LIDE China, already since years, joining LIDE organization. And I got a long list. Maybe you can explain later a bit more in depth your main task, but one of them is the institutional managing partner of Braga Nascimento Exílio law firm. He actually, in normal times, he today lives in São Paulo, but between 3 and 5 times a year, he spends all in all several months in China and lived there. Even he did his MBA at the Beijing University with great distinction, by the way, between the years 2009 and 2011. So a long experience in China, for sure, a fascinating market, and becoming more and more important for the entire world, even for Brazil today, China is the most important business partner, quite different than if we compare with 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where China was not by far not of that importance, and today it is partner number one. Amongst others, he is very much engaged since last year as a researcher at the BRICS countries, which I think it will be interesting for us to know a little bit more for him about that. If I switch, in order not to become too extensive, to Gerard Shore, he is based in France. He is a native Mexican and strong links to Spain, especially to the northern, not the northern, but close to the Pyrenees, to the Catalonia. And he is with Integration Consulting since 2008. Correct me if I'm wrong. And even before having joined Integration, he has a vast experience during 25 years for huge and worldwide famous companies like L'Oréal, Colomer Group, and Unilever Group. So a very broad experience in different top companies around the world. And finally, to Mr. Götz, he is the owner and CEO of BAM Cases, an interesting company with roundabout, hopefully it continues, with 300 employees. I mean, hopefully during Corona times, based in close to Deauville in France, but having branches in up to China, Russia, even Brazil, and the United States. So producing roughly, I think if I got the information correctly, around about 150,000 very special cases and boxes for high quality and of top performers around the world, musicians basically. And for sure he can explain a little bit more about his since the company is existing since 40 years, founded around 1970, even more, close to 50 years in the 70s. And I think 2011 you took over the company BAM Cases, which by the way stays for Boîte à Musique. This is the three letters, BAM, Boîte à Musique. And that's from my side, just shortly that you know who are attending. And I would like to pass over to, I don't know, maybe
Mr. Shaw?
Ricardo.
Mr. Shaw? Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Shaw, okay. Mr. Shaw is the first speaker to give a short overview from your perspective, how Corona or COVID-19 is affecting all of us, especially your company with a very international footprint around the globe.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to everyone, our audience. A pleasure to be with you. And today, I just wanted to introduce who we are and why effectively this international exposure has led us to have a privileged overview. We're a consulting firm, so we have offices scattered around the world. We started in Sao Paulo. We're, in that sense, a Brazilian-born company. Very quickly, we developed our network towards the rest of Latin America. I myself founded the Mexico City office, and then we expanded outside of Latin America to Europe first. So we have an office in Munich, one in London, and recently we expanded to the US, opening an office in San Francisco, and very recently, last year, in Chicago. What I wanted to tell you about Brazil, I'm going to focus more on the Brazilian situation. We're going to talk a lot about also China and Germany, but in terms of Brazil, what in my opening remarks, I would like just to give you like the big four pillars of what, in our sense, are defining the situation in Brazil. I would say that the first one is Brazil and, of course, within America. But today we're talking about the region where the epicenter of the pandemic is. Okay, so this is important. It started in China, it moved to Europe, and it's now really developing in a peak situation in Latin America, and Brazil being the biggest hit country is, of course, very much affected. Okay, so the numbers have been low at the beginning. When, in fact, I was just checking some numbers. When the peak of the pandemic started the peak of the pandemic was in effect in Europe around the 30th of March. Brazil had less than 1,000 cases at that time. Okay, so really Brazil started to grow much later than the others, but of course in a let's say algorithmic way, and growing, as you know, today to almost 1.5 million cases. Brazil is suffering 40,000 cases a day, so it's huge. There's just the US having bigger numbers than that. Of course, when we talk about cases, you all know we're probably under measuring. And we have, of course, the tragedy of more than 60,000 deaths already in Brazil, more than 1,000 a day, 1,500. There are days of 1,500. So this is I think it's very important when we talk about Brazil to, most of you, of course, know it, but Brazil is now like with the US, the center of where this thing is developing and growing. The second thing, which is very important, I think, when we talk about Brazil is, as in many countries, but I would say Brazil is one of the most touched by this, is that politics are adding oil to the fire in this situation. Okay, as you have seen, there has been a bitter disagreement between President and two of his health ministers. He had two resignations in a few weeks. This early discussion about what's the priority, public health or economy, led to a huge polarization and a disrespect to the population, where people felt they were being sacrificed in some places. The federal government was far away from the local measures, and as we saw, a lot of uncoordinated activities took place between the federal and the state level. And of course, some senior officials in the justice system are really calling the president a threat to democracy, which is something that is quite interesting. And I don't think we have seen this not even in the US, where we also have quite a polarization. But in Brazil, we're seeing open questioning of the performance of Mr. Bolsonaro. The third point that I wanted to highlight here in this overview is that in Brazil, this pandemic found a fertile ground. We are landing in a country with healthcare systems are not well prepared. Remote rural areas and underdeveloped communities are suffering a lot. Very difficult to find doctors and hospitals in a lot of places in Brazil, as in most of Latin America. My country, Mexico, is exactly the same. And of course, when we see this from Europe, where our government stepped in very, very rapidly, those economic stimulus packages did not come in Brazil. They're very small little parches and very small actions that absolutely did not make any difference to the people. We have an informal economy in Brazil, so it's very difficult to track small entrepreneurs, to give them any stimulus. So that that didn't help mitigate the suffering. And of course, I think something that we have to say is that the currency in Brazil devaluated one of the sharpest levels. No, Brazil real devaluated between 14 and 34% compared to all its partners. So it's one of the hardest hit currencies in the world. Finally, uncertainty prevails because we have not reached the peak. We don't know. So all this is bad, but the problem is that we're still there. We're not seeing the end of the tunnel. The whole region, as we mentioned, but especially Brazil, is still growing cases every day. Every day is getting worse. Where we are here in Europe already looking forward and seeing that this is becoming something we can live with, our Brazilian friends and the country is still now saying, when will this end and where is it going? In Latin America, only Uruguay seems to be having the situation under control. So we don't know, the healthcare systems might not sustain if the pressure continues, and we could see like this nightmare things we saw in Ecuador at the beginning of the pandemic. So I think this, for me to start to put this thing into perspective, those are the four things that we're looking at in Brazil, and then we'll talk a bit more about how businesses live into this scenario.
Okay, thank you. Gerard, may I pass now to José Ricardo? You give you a short overview, please.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning for the audience that is watching us. It's a real pleasure to join you directly from São Paulo in Brazil. Thank you very much again, Fabiana, for such a nice invitation from LIDE Germany. As one of the international units of LIDE, LIDE China is a business platform that unites the Chinese with the Brazilian entrepreneurs. Talking about China, China now, the Middle Kingdom, is definitely on the spot. Everybody is watching all the measures and all the strategy that was established by the central government. China is a country which successfully is fighting against COVID-19. You can see all the lockdowns and all the technology that is being applied, and I'm going to explain later on about it. But it's a place which is responsible now for 90% of the total production of the individual protection equipments, and it's also responsible for 1/5 of the total ventilators that are produced in the world. So China is playing a very important role in this sense, and is helping several countries to fight against this pandemic. You can see that China already sent over 26 medical teams to different countries, and is donating several masks and other medical equipments to the other countries. If you pay attention on how China is developing the country, you have to pay attention a lot in technology. China is investing 2% of the total GDP in innovation. China is playing a very important role in this sense, because everybody now is using the mobile phones, the super apps like WeChat and Alipay to pay the goods, to buy things, to use it to grab a car. The delivery system is very well developed right now. But it's tough to say this to the audience in Germany, because according to the Pew Research Center, in 2019, 56% of the Germans had an unfavorable view of China. So if if you analyze how China is fighting against COVID, you can see that China is applying drones to clean the public areas, and it's 50 times more efficient than manpower. China is using a lot of big data and artificial intelligence to monitorize and to do the diagnosis of COVID-19. China is also cleaning, for example, public buses with ultraviolet system. It's an equipment that cleans the buses in 5 minutes, while with manpower, you have to spend 40 minutes for that, and it's much more effective. China is also using a lot of robots that deliver the drugs, the medicine, and also the food to the room of the patients in the hospital. So you can have a less contact between people, and in order to avoid the spread of this invisible enemy that is attacking the whole world. So if you analyze carefully all the measures that China is doing, I think that it's a great opportunity for the business entrepreneurs in Germany, in Brazil, or any elsewhere to try to cope with China and try to share this experience, because they are really successfully going against this COVID-19, and we have a lot to learn with China. During this debate, I'm confident that we can share some of these experiences, and I'm gonna discuss a little bit about it during our program today.
Okay, thank you very much, and really some astonishing and interesting numbers you just mentioned about different aspects of China, including those 56%. In the opinion of Germans, not being that much in favor of the country. On the other side, you have, I mean, huge companies, German-based companies or from German origin, doing today the biggest portion of their business worldwide is made in China. Just comes to my mind the Volkswagen Group. So without China, they wouldn't be where they are. Just one comment in between. But now let's move to Robert Götz, and I would appreciate if you can give us a short overview about your view and the good things, most probably not that many, but how you are suffering from this pandemic in your country, in your company.
Well, let me start just introducing our company so you understand. We are a small niche company, but we're active worldwide. So we have production facilities here in France where the main production is, and then we have a production in Kosovo and one in Thailand. But we also have distribution companies in Brazil, in Russia, in China, and in the US. All the other parts of the world we service by wholesale companies who work together with us for those countries. For us, as an export company, I would say 98% of our products are exported from France all over the world. Within our niche, this pandemic is really hitting us the hardest it can get, because we are a producer of, simply to say, luggage, and luggage in times where there is no traveling and it's not foreseeable when traveling is going to restart, is a no-go, so to say. And the second is our end customers, the musicians, are in a very difficult situation worldwide, as all concerts and big events and all philharmonies and operas are closed. Carnegie Hall, I just learned yesterday, is closed until the 6th of January, just as one example worldwide. So we find ourselves in a very difficult situation. What we experience in several parts of the world is the restart of the economic activities a little bit in Europe. Yes, Europe is what we heard from my previous colleagues here in this talk. We have a restart in Europe and we have a restart in China. But the rest of the world for us is still complete shutdown. I just talked to our Brazilian manager in Sao Paulo, and she told me there's just simply nothing happening. So for us, we now face again the shutdown of our companies for August and September. We will completely shut down production because we simply are not getting any new orders. And yeah, this is the situation. And when we say stimulus for the economy in Europe, yes, we have. I wouldn't even call it a stimulus. We just have a support from the government what lends us money. It always sounds like the government in France or in Germany is pouring money over us little mid-range companies, PME, as we call it in small and medium-sized companies, as we call it in France. They are not really pouring money over us. They loan us money, and this money we have to pay back. So the thing is, the capacity of every company to loan money goes up to a certain point where it sees in a foreseeable future in the next 5 years, 6 years to pay back those loans. But at a certain point, you will overdraw. And we hope that economy restarts before this point of no return is coming. And yeah, and this is the difficult situation we are in today.
Yeah, for sure, quite difficult. Thank you very much for your short description. And it's funny what you said when you said that Carnegie Hall will be shut down until January. And on the other hand, I heard the other day, a few days ago, that Salzburg there will take place the Festspiele now in summer. So different approaches in nearly neighboring countries. So.
Yes, I agree with you. This is one of the things what are really hard for us also to kind of measure or to evaluate, because every country, this is more my personal opinion. You know, everybody's talking about the second wave, the second wave. So I don't think there's going to be a second wave. I think there's going to be waves until we find a vaccine. And all those waves, they will not lead again to a shutdown, because I don't think this is politically possible to go through. I mean, all over the world. I think this is all over the world, the same situation. And the question for us is when will a normal course of cultural life will restart. And there I'm pretty critical, because the cultural part, as important as it is for all societies, it is always more or less the last in the row, the last in the food chain. And this is a bit a pity for us and a pity for the culture and for music and theaters and because still the culture is a huge part of all our identity and all our lives. So we hope the best for the recovering of the economies. And but when I talk to Russia, when I talk, as I said, to Brazil, this is not very positive and very optimistic. This is rather optimistic in China. And this is one of our little lights at the end of the tunnel, what we see in China, because business is picking up there. And also even concerts are taking place again. Not everywhere, but not in every big city, but in quite some big cities. So this is a little bit a good sign. And as I said, in Europe, and I think in Europe we will get back to a more or less normal life, I hope, at least after the so-called summer vacation, summer shutdown.
Yeah, I think none of us is a doctor or have medical background as far as I read, but the big question, as you mentioned, is I would agree with what you said, that there will be several, hopefully smaller waves until we really have a vaccine or some other drugs against the virus. But okay, let's maybe move to some questions, and feel free to answer whoever would like to. I think in order not to become only too negative, I would say that the virus will be a strong accelerator in digitalization. So what we are doing now here, for example, and this happened now, millions and millions of calls and webcasts and so forth. So this is thanks to the technology we have available since several years. And talking about Germany, Germany is not the star. So even if you travel through Germany, you have still today several holes when you go from A to B, from, I don't know, Munich to Hamburg, or I don't know from where to where you don't have even a signal to have a call with a cell phone. So for sure, I would be interesting how you see it. Maybe starting with Jose Ricardo, the digitalization in China, and maybe you have some aspects also from other countries, but especially focusing on China.
It's very important to mention about digitalization, especially because everything now in China is about going online. Only for your reference, in 2020, the total revenue of online streaming will be of 14 billion euros. They have, for example, every November 11, it's called the Singles Day. It's a 24 hours online shopping. They sell everything. They can sell pen, they sell computer, they sell water, bottle of water, they sell cars. And in 2017, the total sales in 24 hours was of 25 billion US dollar. In 2018, it was of 30 billion US dollar. And last year, the total revenue was of $38.5 billion. 24 hours of this Alibaba online shopping sells 38 billion. Just for you to have an idea, 1 hour of this 24 is equivalent to 365 days of online sales of e-commerce in Brazil.
Wow.
So it's amazing. It's amazing. And China is developing the technology in the technology aspect. China is developing the Belt and Road Initiative, that it's not only developing the infrastructure all over the world, but also we're talking about the Digital Belt and Road Initiative, that they are trying to develop the technology, the telecommunication, the 5G, which will be even possible for you to have surgery with doctors that are living that are staying in a different place than the patient because of the robots. It will be able even for the autonomous vehicle, and it's a big change, especially for Germany. And you can see several car manufacturers such as Mercedes, Audi, BMW, Volkswagen, and etc., analyzing the trends in China of how the infrastructure of the car will change because of this autonomous vehicle. And besides this telecommunication 5G, which, by the way, China is responsible for over 40% of the total revenue in relation to 5G in the world. They also have the e-commerce, online streaming, KOL, the key opinion leaders, which is famous people that are selling whatever they have in hands, and this is a big trend, especially when all the shops were closed recently because of the pandemic. And this is a trend that there is no turning back. The Chinese, they having all this online offline experience, which they may have, they may see the products by themselves in the shopping malls, but they have a lot of incentives to buy even cheaper to buy online, and that's the reason why they're being so successful in having both experiences of online and offline. And besides the technology, the telecommunication, 5G, and the e-commerce, you have the third one, that it's about the smart cities. Smart cities is also a trend. It's also something that China is developing really fast, because the big data is the new petroleum, and China is paying a huge attention on that. They are developing high-end equipments because there are several incentives from the central government. For example, in this sense, in relation to the smart cities, it's important to mention about the policy that is named Made in China 2025. What is this? Made in China 2025 is a central policy from the Chinese government, in which the high-end products, 40% of the total high-end products, shall be produced within the Chinese territory in 2020. And until 2025, they expect to produce 70% of the total high-end products in China and not abroad. So it's a big trend. You can see that China is, in terms of medicine, is trying to cope with, for example, the WHO, the World Health Organization, and it's paying a lot of attention and efforts on the global governance. But at the same time, they are thinking not like the Brazilians in a long-term investment. China, since 1949, always paid a huge attention on that. And they have two very important datas that will be 2021, in which the Communist Party will celebrate 100 years of existence. And in 2049, China will celebrate the 100 years anniversary. So they are paying a lot of attention on that and trying to make a better living for the national citizens. And at the same time, besides providing and fighting against poverty, China will extinguish poverty until this year, until the end of this year in 2020. China is trying also to promote what they say it's a common shared future. And what is a common shared future? It's a future not only for the Chinese, but with the Belt and Road Initiative and other policies that China is trying to promote all over the globe. China is trying to successfully win the battle against COVID-19, and at the same time build a common shared future with other countries that are partners with China. For example, Brazil is the first country in Latin America in which exceeded already the business, the import and export over $100 billion US. China is the biggest trader of Brazil since 2009. And it's in 2018 and also in 2019, China and Brazil, they celebrated the $100 billion US in trade. So China is a very important partner, not only for Brazil, but also for Germany. You can see how is the trade in Germany with the Chinese, and even the expats in China. There are several German companies in China in order to get a little bit of these opportunities, because now the world is paying a huge attention on the Chinese consumer market. The Chinese, they want more and more to eat better food, and they are importing food from Brazil, they are importing food from Australia, they want to have the better cars. So all the German manufacturers, the dealers, they're working with the Chinese counterparts, and China is trying to develop the society as they say that it's they want to provide, the central government want to provide to its citizens a prosperous environment, meaning you can just judging by the numbers, you can see that the consumer, the middle class in China is between 400 to 600 million people. So it's a very nice market. So the German companies that wants to deal with China, they're starting to pay a lot of attention on this consumer market. It's also important to mention that it's not an easy thing. The relationship with China, for example, the BRICS countries. If you analyze the current situation between China and India, the Indian government already blocked several apps from the mobile, the Chinese apps like TikTok, for example, because they are having several disputes with the Chinese government, not only in relation to business, but also in relation to territory. So again, China is facing a huge challenge all over the world. I'm not only talking about about the BRICS, about India, but I'm also talking about the trade war with US. They are only in the first phase of the agreement, but at the same time, you can see that China is suffering a huge loss, not only the Americans. And one last thing that I would like to mention is that people think that China is developing since 1949, but actually China was one of the most important countries for centuries. Only in this window of 200 years that China lost the leading position in the world. So China is just returning with its power and influence all over the world.
Yeah, really astonishing numbers. Just the one you mentioned in one, if I got it correctly, in 1 hour on the day in November, it is equivalent to the 365 days, so all over the year of e-business in Brazil.
Yes.
So this is right. 1 to 365. So it's really just maybe not insisting too much on China, but I would have another question. First, there's how should I say, some skepticism, at least in Germany, in Europe, and even in other parts of the world, when I talk to people. How reliable are the coronavirus numbers we get here in the media? So they are extremely low from what we can read or can see in TV or in the papers or in the media in general. Do you believe it, or do you think they are in fact much higher than related? And linked to this, maybe another macroeconomic aspect. Where do you see, or how do you see the evolution of the GDP growth, or even negative growth, in the year 2020 compared to last year?
Well, Andre, they're very relevant comments. In relation to the data that was provided about the deaths, the number of deaths in China, it's very important to say that China is successfully fighting against COVID-19 because of 3 factors. To my eyes, China has 3 factors, and they are the reason why China is winning this battle. The first factor is that China has a Confucius society. And what it means having a Confucius society, the idea of collective and the idea of central government is a very key factor. in a sense, in terms of the Chinese people, they believe in the government policies, in the central government policies. Besides this cultural factor, I may say that China also has the experience factor, in a sense that...
Sorry to interrupt. I think this is a huge difference to maybe most other, if not all other countries. Look at Brazil, look at France, look at Germany. So we do not, or to some extension or larger extension, trust in the politics. So we always think, or many of us think, that the other party is better and the other guy is better, or the other lady, and back and forth. So we are not in a streamline like apparently China is. Maybe we wouldn't be that glad all with the cultural background we have in being Europeans mainly. But I think this is at the end of the day a certain advantage in order to really move such a big country and such a major population of 1.4 billion forward.
Sure. As I was telling, there are several factors that explain this. This cultural, this experience, because they had also SARS, for example, in 2003, and they have the technology factor. The technology factor in which, for example, we were just discussing before the live, it's amazing how the central government applies this lockdown system, for example. Now, if there is any focus of the disease in China, they completely shut down all the transportation, and they completely shut down the commerce and etc. In a sense of China is regardless the numbers, if the numbers are correct or not, if they are less than what really happened, I think that the central government plays a huge role, and that's completely different from Brazil. And Gerard explained it really well about the crisis in Brazil, because in Brazil, for example, we don't face only the crisis of the COVID-19. We face the crisis of the COVID-19. It's a health crisis. We are facing the political crisis, in which there is a huge tension between the federal government and the state governments. And besides this, we also have this challenge of the economy, because there are a lot of companies going bankrupt in Brazil, as any elsewhere in the world. But in Brazil, we are facing three different aspects. And in relation to this, to the other comment that you provided, and that in relation to the economy, every February in China, they have a national assembly in China. It's a political meeting in which they discuss what happened in the last year and what are the plans for the next for the current year. But this time it happened in the end of May. It's the first time that happened this, and this is the first time since the opening of China in '78, or I may say since the first time since the 90s, when China started to announce what is the expectation of the economy growth. This is the first time when in which China did not mention what will be the new normal, because until a few years ago, China had that double-digit growth. So they were growing between 10 to 12% every year. Then they went to the new normal. The new normal is an expression that exists before the COVID-19 in China. The new normal is the growth of China in terms of 6.5%. But now, because of the pandemic, the central government did not announce what will be the numbers, the forecast for this year. But the specialists mentioned that the expectation is around, roughly speaking, around 2.1%. This is the growth that China will have in 2020, which, by the way, is also big, but not as big as China needs. Because China, when you look at it, when you look at the country, you have to see that China is a huge elephant in a bicycle. if it goes fast, it loses the brakes. And if it goes slow, the elephant drops from the bicycle. So it has to continue. It has to have a steady growth. Otherwise, there will be tensions between the central government and the people, the Chinese population.
Yeah.
If you compare, for example, in Brazil, you have a 220 million people country. You see how difficult it is to discuss politics in Brazil. Imagine times 7. As you said, China has 1.4 billion people.
Yeah.
So it's a huge concern from the central government. The Chinese central government is very concerned about the economy, because the economy is one of the pillars for maintaining the stability of the politics in China.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Really highly interesting. Maybe Gerard, would you like to add something, or maybe from your perspective, being related or working for many different kind of customers, whom do you see beside digitalization? Maybe some companies or some areas which could be kind of maybe not the big losers, but the winners of the effect of the coronavirus, and maybe which ones you would see will be suffering the most? We already mentioned a little bit about it, but maybe you will deepen it a little bit more.
Yes, sure. Well, we don't have an extensive sampling, of course. No, I have to disclaim that. What we have done is we in fact work with LIDE together into a questionnaire that we have sent together, Fabiana, to clients. We have more or less 30 people lately, 30 companies that have engaged with us in this questionnaire lately in Germany. I'm talking about LIDE Germany. And we have had quite some returns. But I would say in Brazil, we have had a much more contact with clients. And I would say, let me put you like, I see a summary of what is happening in Brazil in this, let's say, sense of the different sectors or industry. Let's remember something. Brazil has a very complex logistic network inside. When you compare it to what we were just describing in Chile, in China, or what we know in Europe, Brazil has, very little infrastructure for a huge country. So that would say, this is very complicated for anything. When it's disturbed, it becomes very complicated. Nevertheless, what we have seen and our clients have told us is that basically their supply chain during the pandemic was not much interrupted. And why is that? It's like Brazil has less contacts with the international markets than other countries. So Brazil is quite a autonomous country in respect to its supply chain. No, so you have components from one region to another region, but they didn't have to deal. Companies did not have to deal with a disruption of global trade in Brazil.
Yes.
That's I think important for this country. We mentioned devaluation at the beginning, and of course, when you deal with export, and you're happy when your currency devaluates, because your products are much more competitive and you can take the place of other companies. But when you import, of course, you suffer from a much more expensive ingredients. In terms of industries, what we have seen is the agricultural industry, which, as you know, is important in Brazil. Brazil has the fourth largest country in the world in terms of agricultural land. The agricultural business.
Will be a record. Will be record safra. How do you say?
Exactly. Exactly.
This year of more than 250 million tons in grains.
They're booming. I mean, the agricultural sector in Brazil is booming, is incredibly booming. The retail sector is suffering. the retail sector is suffering. We have heard a lot what our clients are doing, so they really are reacting to this. So, for example, we heard some clients that have completely canceled promotions, which I'm going to go, if you're interested, down to very nitty-gritty like strategy, but many clients have said, you know what, we can't work with promotions, which is a basic tool in the retail, fast-moving consumer goods industry. And companies have stopped doing that, really putting bigger package sizes in the market, stop doing promotions, and try to get close to their consumers. That's what they're doing. Basically, we spoke about tools a moment ago, digital tools or social networks. They're trying to get closer to their clients, understand what they want, and we see a boom in communication, new networks being created. But retail is probably the sector we're seeing, of course, that is suffering a lot, specifically in Brazil. As we mentioned at the beginning, the music industry, the show industry, the entertainment industry is, of course, completely closed as in other countries.
And how do you see the new technology in this sector, in the retail sector? Brazil is a country that are very they have some good companies and digitalization, IT industries, for example, and are a country very, they use a lot of tools to retail. And how do you see the strategies from the companies in Brazil for the future?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. Well, Brazil is way behind what we just heard about China in terms of mega structures of communication. No? But what we saw is things that were behind suddenly exploded. No? Of course, e-commerce in Brazil exploded during these years. It was, of course, not at the level that we see in Europe, US, or China, but e-commerce has boomed. And everything that has to do with it, not just the platforms, but also the logistics, transportation to it. We saw very nice examples. For example, we have a client, I don't know if you heard, Fleury is a medical diagnostic company. They created in a few days, they created something that they should have done many months before or years before. They created a complete telemedicine department. With tools and then started communicating with their patients and doctors and payers and social security organizations with telemedicine tools in a few days. They had never finished it, but they put it in place, and they spoke about it to us, and it was very impressive to see with very low budgets, in fact, and they created that. We have many little examples about this very creative use of technology in a country that has traditionally not invested too much. Very creative, yes, but maybe the infrastructure is not so big.
If I may add, Gerard, I think this is an excellent example of Fleury. I know them. I did in former times my exams there with Fleury in São Paulo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what you just mentioned, that they did it in a few days. And beside what Jose Ricardo told us about China, so this, what is my point? The acceleration of new ways. And this, I think, will be the big challenge for Europe, where I feel, and mainly in Germany, where I live now, it's the question of speed. So we are, and for sure, maybe Mr. Götz from in France, maybe he sees it similar. So in Europe, we are not fast enough. So you have to be fast, and as you said, a medicine analytical enterprise like Fleury, they did something in order to get customers just in a few days, as you just said. So this is what we all will need in hope. I only can hope in these times. So to see some small positive aspect of COVID-19 in order to get faster in moving forward with new niches of the economy.
Yep, absolutely.
Maybe we can make now some statements to end this meeting. We have.
Time is over.
Time is over. Unfortunately.
Let me do the first finishing statement. So I just want to point out that digitalization it speeded up a lot this COVID crisis. As you can see here, our little studio around me. This is not my office. This we created to have meetings with customers and to do meetings what we usually have on trade shows. But all these trade shows are canceled for this year, as everywhere. So what we installed this studio here to have the same atmosphere, the same booth, the same corporate identity as we have it on trade shows all over the world. So this is one aspect we as a small company drove forward. And I agree with you, the question is speed. And another development what we were pushing during this crisis is the development of an application. What we already have, we have an application to follow expensive instruments and to monitor them. So in their luggage, through the network through the mobile phone network. But what we did as an add-on, and this is come back to speed, we now added a platform for musicians to do tutorials, to give lessons online on the mobile phone, because like this they can generate some revenue by using the app. But as I'm repeating myself, it is all a question of speed, and we will not be done before beginning of September with this app. On the other hand, the only sales we do today of our product more or less are online. Yes, the online business is the driver. It is the only way how we can survive in this situation, and it is stealing away a lot of revenue from our traditional clientele. These are shops, and it is just accelerating this development now, the COVID crisis. So I can only say the digital development in all this is driven a lot, has got really picked up speed, and it will change our whole world in the midterm. And,
I agree.
Also, we did one step back in our facility in Thailand. We started producing masks.
Very good.
So that's more a little step back. We by today we produced like 10 million masks. So this is like more rather a step back from digitalization.
On the wave of the time. Very good. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I don't know, Gerard, would you just to point out just one or two or three sentences to the final round, as Fabiana said?
No, I think we covered very interesting things. Difficult to know where we're going. I have been, visiting clients these days, and some of them really we see two different worlds. It's very interesting. I was yesterday in a construction company here in France that was purchased by a German construction company, and things are booming. Everybody's happy, and everybody's just thinking that e-commerce is going to create a lot of opportunities in the logistic buildings that they do. And at the same time, I know a lot of companies that are completely suffering. And so what will be the new normal? It's an exercise in futurology that I haven't read anything. I don't know you guys, but haven't read anything that is definite. There's a lot of opinions of what will be this new normal, which sectors will boom, what sectors will not. How are we going to behave? Are we going to stay home? Yes or no? I haven't made up my mind. I think it's my sensation is that a lot of tools will change, but everybody is longing to go back to the old world. I'm not saying it's great, but I think that's what I'm reading in many people's opinions. Everybody says, just let's go back to work and let's put all this behind us.
Okay.
I'm talking, of course, about the professional and let's say institutional world. I'm not talking about people that have been affected.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerard. And Jose Ricardo, you would still like to add something?
Well, just to add that we have to reinvent ourselves, right, as entrepreneurs. And we have to focus and pay attention to this new retail. This is what they say, they call the new economy, the digital economy, the fourth revolution, because this will definitely will be a trend. And I'm not only talking about the teenagers and the young people, but it will affect the whole society. So if I may say, I would suggest the entrepreneurs that are watching us today should pay attention on the experiences that China is having, because it's a source of ideas. It's a place where they are trying different things every day. China is booming. China, if you pay attention on the Chinese startups, for example, only in 2018, in each 3.8 days, one unicorn in China was born. And unicorn means $1 billion. Now China is having the decacorns. There are companies that are worth $10 billion. So this is a nice experience, and I think that this can be an inspiration for all of us, regardless being in Germany, in Brazil, in Mexico, whatsoever. And I would just would end by thanking again LIDE Germany for this nice experience, to share my thoughts and also to communicate with you about the experiences that China have and may also help us to fight against COVID-19.
It's a pleasure.
So thank you, everybody, very much. I think it was highly interesting, maybe especially on those really large, astonishing numbers around China. And I think we still will have a lot of things to do with you, not only becoming, you already are, I mean, China, a leading macro economy, and maybe in the near future, it will be not the US great or big again, but China definitely, with the speed you just told us, with a few figures, are really taking the lead because of speed and how fast you move things in the country. You know very well due to your large experience over there. So thank you, everybody, very, very much, and hope that Fabiana, maybe we can redo something like that in a foreseeable future, and hopefully by then, having come to the so-called new normality, whatever this will mean, and some aspects we just touched on today, and I think it should have been interesting for some of the audience we had around. So thank you very much to everybody. And Fabiana, you want to close?
Yes. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next time.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening or morning or whatever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you to all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.